Today, I'm going to talk about bioimpedance analysis, which is a very complicated technical word for measuring your body fat and much more. So I've got the amazing InBody 570, 590. It's a great tool. A lot of the higher end gyms and some medical clinics, they have this impedance analyzer, and it's something similar you've seen at home or that you have at home perhaps, where you have those scales that you just stand on and it measures your weight and you're barefoot on it and it can tell you your body fat. So those are commercial home scales. Those are not as technically accurate. They don't give you all the information that they potentially could. And in the office here, we've got the InBody's amazing, and it's got like four points of contact, so your hands and your feet. And there's a great printout, and it measures what it's actually technically measuring is an electrical resistance, like a current being sent throughout the body, and the speed and there's so many technical things, but essentially it's comparing differences in current being perceived and measured throughout the hands and feet, through the hands, through the feet, all that sort of thing. And then they use that to permutate your basal metabolic rate, because you'll input your height and your weight and your age and your gender. You will put in, that's all the information you put in, and it spits out your basal metabolic rate, your percentage body fat, your skeletal muscle mass, intra and extracellular water levels, which is important. It measures your visceral fat. So and I'll probably put an overlay of like a sample report so that we can kind of use a comparison. And why is this test and why is this report important? A lot of people lately have been coming in that are starting a fitness routine, fitness challenge, adopting changes in their lifestyle with their diet, and they want to know where they're starting off at and tracking progress over time. And this machine does this perfectly because everyone has a unique ID, and subsequent readings, then you come in and do it each month perhaps, or every 2 weeks, it does a comparison to last time and the previous 10 readings. So it stores all that information. You get to see trends and changes, and then we can adjust your programming based on the information that we're getting. The interesting thing I see when someone comes in for the first time, they do their InBody analysis. Some people, they've never done any type of analysis like this, so it's all new to them. They didn't know what their percent body fat is. A lot of people, they'll be like, well, I think I'm maybe like 20%, or like, I was, doing some calculation online, and based on my weight and this, it tends to not be an accurate calculation when you do put your numbers in on a website or on your phone. With this machine, it's precise, meaning like it's measuring accurately each time for you, which will give you consistent readings, as opposed to, one place at the gym, they measured it, they have a slightly different scale. I did that at home, I did it with you. It's not apples and apples. So you want to be consistent with that. One of the things that people really don't have any clue about is their basal metabolic rate. They've heard of metabolism, they've heard about their metabolic rate, then they feel like, well, if I gain weight fast or if I lose weight fast, I must have a high metabolism. Or if I eat a lot and I burn it all, I don't gain weight, I must have a high metabolism. That's partly correct, but there's actually a number that you can measure, and it's very useful. So having a basal metabolic rate value, this is the amount of calories your body burns just by existing. It's based on your mass. It's not based on physical activity. So you just lie there all day, 24 hours. Your basal metabolic rate is how many calories you'll burn just breathing. So obviously it's not indicative of like what your physical output would be your work effort, your training, because that would be a surplus. Now, when someone is trying to figure out how many calories they should be eating in a day, the loose concept of calories in, calories out really just applies if you just want to stay at a steady state. Like, I want to maintain my weight. I'm at whatever your weight. Let's say you're 170 pounds. You're a male, 5'10", something like that. And I just want to maintain. If your basal metabolic rate is 1,700 calories, if you eat 1,700 calories and you're not active, in theory, you're not going to lose or gain weight. If you become very active, if you're like, no, I train like 6 days a week, I sweat, it's do some cardio, strength training, everything, you're probably burning a couple hundred calories more each day. So that means your caloric intake, in theory, depending on what your goal is now. So if this person is training for the purpose of like to build up muscle, build up their tone and their strength, so you'll need to consume more than that 1,700 calorie metabolic rate, because you have an excess of caloric burn from your physical activity. So if you only eat 17, but you're burning 19, you have a risk of like not gaining as much muscle as you could, but you'd be leaning out and maybe having a difficult time adding on muscle mass because your body's burning muscle, it'll burn fat, it does a little bit of everything, depending on the style of training and stress levels and all that. So that's good information to have. So if you're training and you're not sure what you should be eating in terms of calories and even the makeup of your diet, you should do the InBody so that you know your metabolic rate, you know your muscle mass, you know if you're gaining muscle over time, and you'll know your body fat and see if you're actually getting benefit in terms of the weight loss in that area. The ideal subsequent InBody analysis, what it would look like is, if your goal is to weight loss, then you would have weight loss, but you would want to majority have weight loss in the percentage body fat category, as opposed to losing muscle and fat equally. Now, sometimes people do that initially if they're a little inconsistent with their eating. They're not eating as much. Maybe they're over-focusing on cardio. They're not doing as much strength training. They're not having enough protein or not absorbing that protein that's they're consuming. So they'll have weight loss, but like almost like a 50-50 muscle mass and percent body fat loss. It's not ideal, but it's normal in the beginning. But really, when you start getting into a good consistent routine where you know that you're losing fat, you're maintaining muscle and or increasing your muscle mass, those are good indicators that on the InBody, your training is efficacious and it's coinciding with an appropriate diet for you. A lot of people, when they first come in, and let's say they're not training, let's say they're just, I do this test, the InBody, with every patient. And if someone says like, you know what, I kind of been feeling off, I've been really drained, but my diet's good, I'll do the InBody. And if they have a weight that seems appropriate for their height, like their BMI is good. So just calculate BMI. It's the ratio of your weight to height. And if their weight seems okay, but their percentage body fat is a little bit higher and their visceral fat, which is the fat around their organs, is a little bit higher than I expect, like 10, it's a scale of 20. 10 and above is considered a fatty liver. So usually you want people who are fit to be under 10. That'll be a nice goal for everyone. So if I see someone's InBody and they're like, your weight is 120, you're 5'5", female, it's fine. But your percentage body fat is 35, 36, and your visceral fat is like 13, 14. This is the category what they call skinny fat. And skinny fat is like it's a word gets thrown around, and sometimes people say, well, I mean, I'm not overweight, but I got no muscle, and I feel a little flabby, but I'm still slim. That on a very superficial way, yes, that's what's considered skinny fat. People who are skinny fat, it's not because they are not necessarily inactive. I mean, the fact that they're inactive doesn't cause them purely on its own to be becomes skinny fat. The problem is their diet is either high in carbohydrate. They tend to skip meals. Like they will either they try to intermittent fast, or they just skip lunches, or the protein in their diet they don't sufficiently digest and absorb. So their stomach, I was going to say their stomach only receives and is able to metabolize the carbs in the diet. People who underproduce stomach acid, they can have protein in their usual diet routine, but it's inhibited from being stored and absorbed. So that protein is like all for naught. And your body's only seeing the carbs. And because you're probably a little bit inactive and you're consuming carbs, maybe even under consuming calories. This is another critical thing. You're not reaching your basal metabolic rate for caloric intake. So in those cases, your body's trying to burn calories that it's purely carbohydrate. You're not having a sufficiently high metabolic burn rate. So your calorie intake, even though it's low, might be higher than what your activity level is. So you have a dormant metabolism, calories coming in, inactivity, and these carbs they're just primed for storage. So they go into the fat stores because your body's saying like you're burning maybe 800 calories in a day. You're consuming 1,200. My metabolic rate is 1,500. So metabolism is off the table. It's not working. It's like your car engine is off, not burning any fuel, but you're putting more fuel inside the car. That fuel's got to be stored somewhere. It's like adding gas tanks. Gas tanks. That would be a cool way to describe like love handles. What are that? It's my gas tanks. When I'm ready to burn my fuel, it's all gonna go away. But you gotta start burning those gas tanks. Yeah. Oh man, I could go on all day with that, but I shouldn't. Let's see what else. I think that was pretty good. Dine and dash for the in-body. So do the in-body. You get a bioimpedance analysis. Your biological body measuring the impedance of a current and using that information to get awesome information in terms of body fat, muscle mass, metabolic rate, water levels, distribution also of muscle, where it is. Is it in your upper body, in your arms, in your torso? Is it in your legs? And similarly for fat, it also tells you, you're carrying a little bit lower, your upper body's leaner. So it's endomorph, ectomorph, all that applies. And then we can kind of customize the diet based on what your measures are, and educate you in that way, because there's a lot of good information there. I've seen people have wonderful transformations when they know where to target, because they put in a lot of people, they're like, I put in effort. It's not for a lack of effort. There's a whole category of people that are like, yeah, I'm lazy, I'm not motivated, I'm tired, I'm sluggish, a bad diet. But there's a lot of people who are training hard. They think they're eating right for themselves, and there's one little piece that's just flipped and it's not fitting properly for them. Once we recognize it, put it properly into place, all these results start to show up. And it's like, that's what I've been waiting for. Okay, we'll stop there.